Thank you for having me. So, my name is Steph Hughes. I'm co-founder of Fair Go for Queensland Women, which was founded in 2018 in response to concerning developments in relation to sex self-ID internationally. On December 2nd last year, Attorney General, Minister for Justice, Minister for Women and Minister for Prevention of Domestic and Family Violence in Queensland, Attorney General Shannon Fentiman, had the following to say when introducing the sex self-ID bill in Queensland. No one who engages in the process will do so lightly. It is a deeply personal process and decision which must be respected. I ask, how far must this respect extend? I don't think wearing feminine clothes or makeup is being a woman. And I don't think saying that is what a woman is respect for women. I also do not think that saying women committed offences that were committed by men. And I guess that's the crux of what I wanted to speak about today. Setting aside the obvious disrespect demonstrated by those who say feminine clothing and makeup is what a woman is, and what the alleged minister refuses to see for what it is, I'm yet to hear a valid argument as to why men who claim to be transgender should have their crimes recorded under female crime data statistics. If this is a deeply personal process, why must public information be impacted? With the media falsely referring to men as women, and with crime being reported and recorded in a way that has been corrupted. Indeed, I say that allowing this to occur, either in the media or in crime recording, is the epitome of disrespect for women. For our efforts to address male violence, for the research that has verified the reality of male pattern violence, and for every person who believes facts matter. When our attempts to address male violence internationally rely upon robust information, why should anyone be in favour of clouding some male violence? A couple of people have asked me how and why I started looking into this particular aspect of the impacts of self-ID and trans activism. And so I was thinking a little bit more about that. And I think it started with an awareness around the research of male violence against women and the organisational material that's been around forever. Like, I think this particular slide that's up on the screen now, I think it's been around for 5-10 years. It talks about how the foundations of male pattern violence against women are founded upon sexist stereotypes. They're founded upon the dehumanisation and objectification of women that we see in pornography and across a number of different realms in our lives. And it shows that anyone who, I guess my next thought was, well, if anyone who believes women can and should be dehumanised and objectified, as is necessary to believe that a man can be a woman if he says so, then the precursors for violence against women are already present. Knowing these things, I wondered how the perpetration of any violence, as we know that many males who use violence against others are also violent towards women. And I set out to find out, basically. The dehumanisation of women is evident in reporting like this, which refers to a man not only as a woman, but as female, when they categorically are not. DV research tells us that most people barely read beyond the headline. So, what is the impact of this flagrantly inaccurate media reporting going to have upon the standing of women in the community? Indeed, when a man confronts court twice on the same day, once as a man and once allegedly as a woman, where is the common sense necessary for a well-run public sector? How can we have confidence in the public sector or legal system and be assured that the basic premises of good governance are being upheld? I would suggest that this state of affairs not only dehumanises and objectifies women and causes us to be held in negative regard, but it also brings about the significant risk of reputational damage for organisations. Fair Go for Queensland Women have obtained Queensland Corrective Services data for the past 10 years, so from 2013 to 2022. That data is based upon figures for the 30th of June of each year, and it's divided by the female and male estate and self-ID'd transgender prisoners in those estates. I have asked multiple times for the data related to individuals who have had their birth certificates changed under the current rules, but it has never been provided to me. But I do know that when a person has had their birth certificate changed under the current rules, those crimes are committed under the acquired sex. And I have been advised that males have been placed in the female prison estate already, much to the distress of the women inside. The data shows that year on year, males are in prison at far higher rates than females. And we know this internationally, but it's nice to have it, confirmed for Queensland. You can see that generally the breakdown is around 90% males, 10% females. And here's a picture, I guess, just to show a little bit differently. Sometimes bar graph is a bit more impactful, it makes sense for people. This means that it would take, I guess when we look at the 90 to 10 split, it means that it would take far fewer males to be transferred into the female data for our data to be corrupted. So I'm reminded of a lesson in science subject where it takes a great deal to pollute an ocean and very little to pollute a puddle. And I would submit that female offending is a puddle. And that is what we're on track for here, by allowing male offending to be included in the relative puddle of female criminality, as opposed to the almost non-existent offending of females who identify as transgender. As I mentioned yesterday, we can see that even within the population of individuals who self-ID as transgender, the pattern of male elevated offending is continuing. The reality of data corruption is nowhere more potentially evident and alarming than in the relation to Queensland charges and convictions of aggravated sexual assault. In 2017, there were 8 self-identified males in male prison on that charge or conviction, so that's their most serious charge or conviction, out of a total of 31 trans-identified male prisoners. So that's around 25% of the self-identified transgender population were being held for aggravated sexual assault. That compares in that same year to 9 women out of the whole of Queensland's female population in prison for that same charge. In that year, there were 698 women in prison, which equates to about 1.2% being held in prison for my serious charge or conviction of aggravated sexual assault. So even when you look at this, comparison, the self-identified male transgender population is committing sexual offences at far higher rates than the female prison population. And while some, including the Attorney General, talked about the lived experiences of those who identify as transgender, my thoughts are about instead the reality for those harmed by each of those individuals charged or convicted of aggravated sexual assault. And I feel like there has not been enough consideration or contemplation about the needs of those people. The Minister for Women seems to not want to think about the fact that for each of those males there is a victim survivor, and perhaps more than one. They have friends, they have families, they have communities, and the impacts can be vast and lifelong, as we already know from the data we have from previous personal safety studies taken by the Australian Bureau of Statistics. If, as we are led to believe, because there's no reliable data at this time to say exactly how many individuals are claiming to be transgender. And we've been told the transgender population in Australia is less than 1%. Then anything, I guess this is another way I've been thinking about it, when we look at the Queensland prison population, if we compare the relative numbers in male state or males and females, then you can see that 2021, so if we are to imagine that the transgender male population is, if we say 0.5% of the population, then that's about on par with the male data in prison at that time, because it's 0.48%. But in comparison to the female prison numbers, it's 4.54. So nearly 5% of the population in 2021 would have been males being counted as females due to self-ID. I guess this, I've also examined like a couple of other crimes, and this next one is murder. So you can see that the numbers in relation to murder in Queensland prison population, so that's obviously the most serious charge or conviction that person is currently being held for. It was quite stable at 3 males who self-identified as transgender for a number of years, and then it went to 4 in 2021, and last year 6. So as I've spoken about recently, I think with Sal, we know that male perpetrated homicide is considerably different to female. I think Sheila touched on that earlier as well. So that's, when you look at 2022, that is nearly 10% of the total 63 men who say they are transgender in prison on that day for the charge of conviction of murder, compared to less than 5% of women. And when you think about that, in combination with the number of men in prison for aggravated sexual assault, that's quite scary really, because that's about 35%. Sorry, no, that was for 2017. But that's quite a significant number. Under self-ID also, those 6 men will be able to seek transfer to the female prison estate and are already able to demand intimate searches and to be conducted by female correctional officers. I contend this is both physically and emotionally unsafe for those officers, and it's a wonder to me that such a policy has been allowed to progress. We asked the Australian Bureau of Statistics, our national statistician, for a breakdown on crime data by sex and gender identity some years ago, because I got a little bit tired of just asking Queensland and thought, why don't I just get the national stats? We found that that wasn't possible. They don't have that data. We've found more recently that they cannot even be sure that the data they're labelling as female is actually female. Now, we know that sometimes people take the fall for others on crimes, but that's not what's happening here. What is occurring is that men are saying, I'm a woman and I've done it, and then the government and organisations are naming us responsible, and the media is reporting us as responsible, and we're not. These same or captured departments are then telling the Australian Bureau of Statistics this corrupted information. And I don't believe it's right, I don't believe it's true, but I don't think it's fair that women should have to be treated in this manner and reported upon in this manner. And I don't feel it has anything to do with equality, inclusion or diversity. In 2020-21, the Australian Bureau of Statistics reported that sexual assault and related offences increased in females for that year by 38%. And when I asked them how many of those are actually females, they said we can't say, we just rely on what we get told. So when you think about the data from aggravated sexual assault through the years, you can see clearly how it was real easy to have an increase of 38%, because year on year there has never been a year where male perpetrated aggravated sexual assault in the self-ID trans population has even come anywhere near close to female aggravated sexual assault convictions or charges. So it's ranged from an increase of 43% up to, in 2017, nearly 89% increase. So you can see how a 38% is probably, we haven't seen the worst of it yet, I would imagine. As others have mentioned in the past, self-ID laws promote privacy allowances that are available to anyone else, except maybe those in protected arrangements. Kate Coleman of Keep Prisons Single Sex has spoken at length about how these loopholes create loopholes that are created in process, like our blue card system in Queensland, where there's a reliance upon individuals giving their past aliases, and then the checks are done based on what the applicant advises. I reject the notion that recognising a person's past names or their sex and the alleged difficulties this causes the individuals should be prioritised over the safeguarding processes we have in place, over reality, and over the consent, safety, dignity and privacy of women and girls. The release of England and Wales census data has provided a further avenue to rebut the notion that males who self-identify as transgender do not pose a risk to others and may not artificially inflate female crime statistics. So, and this information is part of a larger article written and posted by Wings Over Scotland, I believe. So you can see that males who self-identified as transgender in England and Wales commit sexual offences at far higher rates than women. 1 in 585 compared to 1 in 243,000. That's not just nothing, that's a massive discrepancy. Why should women bear the indignity of being held responsible for these crimes committed by males? Indeed, in countries such as Belgium, where self-ID is in place, there is sometimes even no means at all to identify any crimes committed by men who say they're transgender. As mentioned earlier, how can we address crime if we aren't actually recording it? When I ran through population figures against the 2022 sexual offending based upon the England-Wales data, I also found a significant increase in male sexual offending compared to female in Queensland. It's only a rough estimation, but you can see that, like, obviously male sexual offending is higher than female. But if we are working on 0.1%, which is a figure that some people have indicated is the transgender population, then males who identify as transgender in Queensland are actually even outstripping the general male population in sexual offending. So, as I said before, it's a rough estimation because there's no actual ABS that cuts off at 18, so I just use the entire Queensland population. So it's just a rough estimate, it's not to be considered conclusive. But you can see, 1 in 168,000 women in Queensland, roughly, charged or convicted of sexual offending in 2022, compared to 1 in 206. That's a lot. So this problem has also been found in other places, such as Norway, where Christina Ellenson discovered some years ago that Norway is also not accurately reporting male pattern violence in much the same way that the ABS, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, isn't. Meanwhile, the Attorney General is telling us that we must not cast undue suspicion on an individual's motives for stating a particular sex. And I just refer back to, this completely negates and ignores the experiences of victim survivors, and I do not feel that's an appropriate response from the Minister for Women, regardless of whether the Australian Psychological Society says so or not. But Scotland has come through again because one of the lead people seeking leadership of the SNP has said that they don't actually believe Anna Graham is transgender, which goes directly against what Shannon Fentiman is trying to make everyone believe here in Queensland. Shannon Fentiman, who not all that long ago said Scotland was a leading light in sex self-ID legislation. So I guess thank you all very much. Oh, I guess, sorry, I thought I was getting the bell. I am getting the bell. But thank you all very much for your participation today. I guess the things that I'm going to continue doing and I would encourage for you is to speak to your local member, speak to your family and friends. I stayed over at a family member's last night and this person was there and he was like, oh, you should hear what I've been telling everyone. They can't believe it where I work. People cannot believe what is being suggested. And it's because people don't know about it that it's being allowed to persist. And it's about time the nonsense stopped. Thank you.